Now watch what Peter does. Look at verse 22. So for the first time now, Jesus explains his mission, that he's coming to die and be resurrected. Then Peter took him aside. Jesus, can I talk to you privately for a moment? He pulls him aside, and look, and he began to rebuke him. He lays into Jesus here. And he says, "Far be it from you, Lord. This shall not happen to you." And Jesus turned and said to Peter, look what he says, "Get behind me, Satan. Get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men." Peter here thinks that he is stepping in here to set Jesus straight, pulls him aside to have a private conversation, starts rebuking him, and Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." This is the guy who 2 minutes ago said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And now, "Get behind me, Satan." Jesus is not saying that Peter is Satan, but what came out of Peter's mouth was from Satan. And I think this is a very, very important lesson for all of us to understand. Jesus came to die on the cross. This was his whole mission. This was his whole purpose and reason for leaving heaven and becoming a man and dwelling among us, was to offer himself as a substitutionary sacrifice for our sins. And when he announces this, Satan was right there to try to stumble Jesus and to keep him from carrying out his mission. And Satan will try to hinder the work and purpose of the Lord in our lives. He will try to stumble us. He will try to keep us from following the Lord and keep us from walking in his ways and doing the things that God has called us to do. And I want you to note here, this is the important part. Sometimes Satan will speak through another person in an attempt to stumble us or discourage us from obeying the Lord. He may even speak through a fellow believer to stumble us. Now, that's not to say that believer's demon-possessed. I'm not saying that. That believer may not even know they're being used by the devil to discourage someone from obeying the Lord. And Satan will do this, especially when obeying God is difficult, especially when obeying God requires some sacrifice on our part. Satan will be right there to say to you, "Far be it from you. You don't have to go through this." I'll give you an example. Maybe you have a married couple. They're going through a rough patch in their marriage. They're both believers. They're just going through a rough patch. They're not headed for divorce or anything like that. Just a rough patch. They just got to work it out and work through it. They're trying to walk through it. They're trying to obey the Lord. And Satan will speak through a friend or a family member and say, "You should just leave him. You deserve better than this. You shouldn't have to go through all of this. You deserve to be happy." And Satan will try to discourage us from obeying the Lord, especially when obeying the Lord is hard and requires sacrifice on our part. And Satan will speak through someone else and tell us, "You should take the easy way out. You shouldn't put yourself through this." Before my wife and I moved here to plant this church, we lived in Florida, and we had plans to move here, and it was so clear to us that God was leading us to move to Maryland to plant this church. And there was a person in the church we attended who was on staff at the church who pulled me aside one day in the hallway to try to convince me not to go. And she said, it's expensive up there. You can't just move to the Washington, D.C. area without a job and without a plan and without any money. You can't do this. It's going to be a disaster. And she thought she was warning us. And I said, get behind me, devil woman. You know, like... This woman cared for us. She was concerned that we were making a huge mistake. And listen, Satan will speak through people to discourage you from following the Lord. That's why you have to recognize the voice of your good shepherd, Jesus Christ. And you have to be able to discern between the voice of the good shepherd and the voice of the enemy. Because the enemy will discourage you. The enemy will stumble you. The enemy will tell you, you don't have to do this. You don't have to put yourself through this. Look at verse 23 again. He says, get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, a stumbling block. Look what he says. For you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of man. Satan will try to get us to see things from a human point of view and not from God's point of view. And the human point of view will always say to you, avoid the pain. The trouble is not worth it. Take the easy way out. But listen, God's way is always right. Even when it's hard, it's always better. And we're grateful, aren't we? We're grateful that Jesus didn't listen to Peter and take the easy way out. That instead, he went to Jerusalem, he suffered, he was killed on the cross for our sins, and he rose again the third day. He did the hard thing. We're grateful for that. So that we could be saved. And so, just be aware. Be aware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and be aware that sometimes Satan will try to stumble you by speaking through another person and telling you to see it from a human point of view and take the easy way out.